Hey guys, welcome back to my channel. My name is Alyssa and this is my booktube channel. So today I'm going to be wrapping up my July TBR. I did manage to finish 17 books and I'll explain why I have quotes around the 17 on that one. So I did actually physically read and finish 16 full-length novels. No graphic novels, which I do feel are accurate and applicable books, but I literally read 16 full novels and didn't supplement with anything, significantly easy. Some of them I did have that were a little short, but they took me a while to get through, and I'll get to that when I get to those. So I did participate in the Book Junkie trials in July, and there were 17 challenges, and as a bard, which was my team at DNF forever, it was just not the right time to read the book. The book that I ended up DNFing was A Little Life by Hanya Yanagihara, and the reason I DNF'd this was because when I initially uploaded my video, I got comments that stated, "This book is so hard, you're not going to want to read this, you can't rush through this book," and so I literally didn't even start it. I didn't bother. I didn't want to worry about it. So I DNF'd it, but that book still counted as a book because of my bard strength. And then as a weakness, I had to read a book about music or poetry, which I did do. And I ended up really liking the book that I read, which was surprising because it was my random pick off the shelf book. So I will go ahead and get started on my wrap up. My team bards did win. We read the most books and the most pages and finished the most challenges, and yeah, so it was really exciting, especially since I think it was the Magi were touted to win because they had the most people, but then we ended up winning, so that was exciting. And as winners, because I was a quiz champion, because I finished all of the challenges, in the next round I actually get all of the powers. So I'll get to DNF a book, I will get to swap a book with someone else's TBR, and it doesn't necessarily have to fit my challenge. I can swap out a book off of my bookshelf, but it does have to fit the challenge, and I will be able to start the readathon. I think it was 3 days early, but it might have been 2 days early. So because I finished all 17 challenges, I do get all of the abilities of all of the teams for the next readathon, which will be really exciting and really cool. Although I don't know that I would have swapped out any of the books this time, but I definitely would have started 3 days early, and I definitely will still want the DNF feature. And maybe my TBR next round will not be as good as the one that I picked. I was really excited about all of the books that I had, and I did knock off quite a few books that I had on my bookshelf that I already owned. I didn't buy one single book for this challenge, so I had something that fit every single one of them, which was really exciting. Some of these books I don't actually have here sitting with me because I gave them already to Logan's mom, so I will not have those to hold up, but I will talk about them. It was a really good reading month for me. I read 6 5-stars. I only read 2 2-stars. There were only 2 books that I really just did not enjoy, and I think that they were just not books for me. I think that there is an audience for these books, so I'm not going to be telling anybody don't read these. They were awful. They were not books for me. But I do think there is definitely an audience for these books, and I will talk about that as I review them. So the first book that I don't have here with me is Sadie by Courtney Summers, which I did already pass off to Logan's mom to read. I gave this 5 stars. It was my reread an old favorite. I love this book. We read it from my book club, so it worked out really well that it fit one of the challenges so that I didn't have to read 18 books. I probably would have tried to fit it into something else, even if it didn't fit that one, but I reread it. I gave it 5 stars the first time. I gave it 5 stars this time. My book club also really enjoyed it, which was exciting because the first book that we read, Catherine Stedman's Something in the Water, we did not like really, and we did like this one. And it was funny because our book club discussion of the book that we didn't like, Something in the Water, was we literally talked about it and talked about what we didn't like about it for an hour and a half, and then with Sadie we talked about that we liked it for maybe 20 minutes, and then we started talking about other things that we wanted to just about. So it was funny because it sounds like we just are a group of people that talk about what we don't like more than what we do like. But it was a nicer reading experience. We all agreed to read something that we enjoyed rather than something that we didn't enjoy and to have to force ourselves to finish. So while we didn't have as good of a book discussion, at least we didn't hate the book too. So the next book that I read was Still Me. It was finish a series that you haven't, or read the next book in a series that you haven't read yet. And so I read the third book in the, I don't know, Still Me or Me series by Jojo Moyes, and I really enjoyed it. So the first book, I don't know if you recall, I really had a problem with the ableism of it, where the way they talked about Will and his physical disability. And then in the second and third book, we don't get as much of that, and so I really liked the second and third book. I really like the way Jojo Moyes writes. I love her writing style. I loved reading her books. I'm going to be reading so much more of hers because I love her as an author. And Still Me, I think, was my favorite of the 3 of the trilogy, I think. The next book, I gave Still Me 4 stars. The next book I have here is My Sister's Keeper. This was a book, the challenge was a book that will make you cry, and this is by Jodi Picoult. I gave this 5 stars. I loved this so much. I saw the movie of this before, so I always try to read the book before I see the movie, but I saw this book when I was really young. I like 8 or 9, maybe 10, and so obviously I wasn't old enough to read or process this book at the time, and so I have seen the movie before I read the book, and I didn't really enjoy the movie, and so I wasn't really interested in picking up the book. You know, even though the book is better always than the movie, the story of the movie I didn't really like, but then everybody was telling me, actually the book is way different, you'll really like the book, you should read it, and I did, and the ending was way different than what happened in the book, and I really loved, or the ending of the book was way different than what happened in the movie, and I really, really loved this ending. I thought it tied it up really nicely, and it definitely was a tearjerker. I don't actually cry during books usually, but I didn't cry during this, but it was definitely like, it pulled on the heartstrings and the emotions for sure. The next book that I read was The Childberry Ladies Choir by Jennifer Ryan, and this was the book that I had to randomly pick off my shelf. I just picked a shelf and picked off of it, and this is what I grabbed. And you know, if I had to pick a book for a challenge that I was reading 17 other books for, I may not have picked the one that was 450 pages long, but it flew. I think I read this in a day. I think I started and finished this in the same day. Actually, no, that's not true. It started off really slow. I read about 40 pages and was about to start another book and maybe potentially DNF this one, and I ended up getting into the story and really loving it. It is about it's World War II fiction about all the women in a town. All of their husbands have left them. You know, there's only a few men left in the village, those that are disabled and unable to fight in the war, and then the pastor as well. And you start out in the book where they're all singing, and it's their last time all singing together, all the men and the women. And then the women come together and like, why do we have to stop singing? We can still sing without the men. We'll just, divvy up the parts. We'll find music that works for our voices. And they ended up using it as a way to distract the town from what was going on. So they'd hold concerts, and they would use it as a way to collaborate among each other and discuss problems and issues that they were having, and all collectively come together and assist each other. There was also a lot of drama in this book that really surprised me, but really drew me in. There was one side story that I was really obsessed with about a midwife, and I really, really enjoyed this book. I was actually really surprised, but it ended up being a 4-star read, so who knew? I also want to go back and talk about what this book was about, because I don't think that I did that. So My Sister's Keeper is about I'm going to try to do this with as little spoilers as possible. It is about a child who her parents created her to be a donor for her other sister. So there are 3 siblings in the family. There's 2 sisters and a brother. There's an older sister, a brother who is middle-aged, and then the youngest sister. And they actually created her in like a petri dish to perfectly match the needs of the oldest sister, who has a form of incurable cancer. And at the beginning of the book, we find out that the youngest sister, who is basically the test dummy for the older sister, is fighting for the rights to her body. She no longer wishes to help her sister out. And we go through all of the court cases and all of the discussion with the lawyers, and that is something that really interests me. I love Jodi Picoult's books because she heavily researches them, and then there's usually a courtroom aspect that I really, really like. And I think that she writes really great fiction she's a really great author. She touches on subjects that a lot of other authors won't touch, and the way that this book ended was really, really good. Nothing like the movie, so I highly recommend this. Next up, I had The Flasher by Beth O'Leary, which I ended up giving 4 stars. I really did like this book. I loved the characters of the book. I thought that the premise was really interesting. So it's about these 2 flatmates. They live together. They live in a 1-bedroom apartment together, but they have never seen each other. They've never met. They have no desire to meet. They just communicate via sticky notes or post-it notes left around the apartment. They're 2 very different people. The woman is really eclectic and the man is really male, you know, just the bare minimum, the basics. Like, he has a dresser and a bed and, you know, that's it. And so they come together and they end up falling in love through these post-it notes, and it's a really cute love story. It's something that I've never read before, and I really did enjoy this book, and I gave it 4 stars. So I know everybody else on BookTube has given this book 5 stars, but romance, while I like reading it, romance is not usually a 5-star read for me. Next, I want to talk about Young Jane Young by Gabrielle Zevin. This was the book that I had to pick for a book that's been on your TBR the longest. This has been on my shelf since 2017. It's one of the very first books that BookTube ever recommended to me, and oh my god, this is my newest favorite read of the year. I loved this book so much. I literally flew through this. So it was a pretty short read, but the type is actually kind of small and it fills the page. And so I thought it was going to take me more than a day. I flew through. It was so good. It is about a woman who's a politician. And so actually there's a man who's a politician, and the woman, it's like it's almost like a Monica Lewinsky story. So she's referenced in this book, but the girl is an intern for a public figure, and she ends up getting in trouble with him. She's doing things that she probably shouldn't be with this man who is much older than her, has a lot more power. There's a big power dynamic difference, and it's told from multiple perspectives, and it's really, really good. I really recommend this. I truly never thought when I picked up a book that was about a Monica Lewinsky story, I didn't think that it was going to be the book for me. I saw a lot of people reviewing it, and it was back when I was really impressionable by BookTube, and I didn't know what I liked, and I hadn't pinpointed the types of stories that I really enjoyed, or the character types that I enjoyed, or the writing style that I enjoyed. And so I was really just buying anything and everything that I saw multiple people recommending, and it's been sitting on my shelf since then, because while I did purchase it and I was excited about it at one point, I lost that excitement, and I'm so glad that I ended up picking this up because it was a 5-star read. It is literally my favorite book I've read this year so far. I loved it so much, and I want everybody to read this book. It was so good. So, highly recommend this one. The next book I read was The Shining, and when I picked this book out for a horror book, it looked like one of the shortest books that I have. It still is Stephen King's on my shelf, and the pages are actually literally as thin as Bible pages, and this is a 700-page book. So it was quite the read while I had 16 other books I had to finish, and unfortunately this was one of my least favorite that I read this month. I gave it 3 stars. This is definitely my least favorite Stephen King I've ever read. I've never seen the movie of this, so nothing was ruined for me. I didn't know really anything about this going in except for the memes that I've seen with like the 2 twin girls in the hallway and Jack Nicholson like in the doorway like peeking out. I didn't really know much about this book. I really truly didn't know anything, and I really ended up not liking this at all, which is really sad because I love Stephen King, and I'm almost wondering if it was just the wrong time to read this, if I was just stressed out by how long it was and how many pages I had to get through, and then that just reinforced the fact that I wasn't enjoying it because I was trying to speed through it. Stephen King books are typically fast reads for me, but this one felt like it dragged on. I don't know, I think I think if I read it another month and had more time to actually slowly go through it and enjoy it, I would have a different opinion. So next month I am going to be reading Dr. Sleep, which is a sequel to this, and I'm hoping that I like that a lot more than I liked this, and I may pick this up another time down the line because I just think it was the wrong time for me on this one. Now, the next book I want to talk about is Inspection by Josh Malerman. I did give this 4 stars, and this is the author who wrote Bird Box, which had a big day in the media a couple months back because Netflix turned it into a book, and Netflix turned it into a movie, and I really enjoyed the book Bird Box, and so I didn't think that Josh could do it again. You know, sometimes when a book gets really big and then another comes out with a new one, it's not always as great as the one it was before. This was so good. I gave this 4 stars. It wasn't quite a 5-star read, but that's because I really don't ever give thrillers 5 stars. Again, thriller is my favorite genre, but the 5 stars that I usually give are ones that really like crush me deep, and they're usually literary fiction or adult fiction or adult contemporary fiction that I give 5 stars. And so while I did really love this book, it definitely wasn't like life-changing. So this book is about a school of boys and a school of girls, and they're all named after letters of the alphabet. There's 26 each. There's 26 boys and 26 girls. So there's an A boy and an A girl, and they don't know that each of the other 2 exists. So the boys don't know that the girls exist at all in any capacity. Not just that they don't know that the school exists, but the boys don't know that women exist at all. All of the groundskeepers, all of their teachers, they're all men. They've never seen a woman before. And then vice versa for the women. And it is told from the first half is from the boys' perspective, and the second half is from the girls' perspective. And there's all kinds of like world building that the author had to do. The schools have their own author that writes books about only men, so there are only boys in the boys' books, and then the women's has a woman who writes about only women. There's only girls in the girls' book, and they are secluded, but the reason that they've secluded each other is because the 2 people who started these schools, a man and a woman who were married, they decided that the opposite gender distracts each other from getting things accomplished, and so if they weren't introduced to this distraction ever, what they could accomplish, and it actually ended up being that all 26 of the individuals were extremely smart, extremely talented. They were able to foster their talents because they didn't have a distraction. But then there was almost like a twist at the end of the book. This was more, I would say more dystopian, which is weird because I don't typically like dystopian, but I would not categorize this under horror thriller regardless of what I just said about not rating thrillers 5 stars ever. I think this was touted as a thriller, but it ended up being way more dystopian because there was nothing scary and there wasn't really like a twist it was leading up to, although there was like on the last page there was like a little, oh, I love that you throw that in kind of thing to make it more interesting. And once you read this, you'll see what I mean, because it wasn't a twist, but it kind of was. I don't know how to explain it, but you have to read this book. It's really good. Josh Malerman. I will probably pick up anything else he writes. I know that he has one other book, I think it's called On Barry Carroll, that I'm definitely going to be reading because I really enjoyed the other 2. So read this. It was really good. The next book I'm going to get to is Night, and at the beginning I talked about how I didn't read any graphic novels or anything that felt like cheating, which again, graphic novels are a completely valid way to especially read 17 books in a month, but I really wanted to emphasize the point that I read 16 novels, like actual physical books. But Night was really short, and now the reason I said that I didn't feel like this one was cheating was because it actually took me a while to get through this, because the topic was, it made me so uncomfortable and so sad. This is, the author was in a concentration camp with his father, and he's talking about all the stories of how difficult it was to get through, and it was a really intense and uncomfortable read. It's not fictional, so it's not something you can really fly through. You really have to feel the emotions of what these individuals were feeling. I gave this 5 stars. I didn't know this was a trilogy, but there are a couple other books that I want to read to wrap this up because I really did enjoy this and I thought it was really good and really important to read. Next I have Naked by David Sedaris, which I gave 3 stars. This is probably my least favorite collection of his work that I've ever read, and I think that's because they were so long. Every other short story collection I've read by David Sedaris, none of the stories were over 10 pages, and so it feels like the books the book flew. I think I didn't like this as much because the stories were a little bit longer, and so instead of being under 10 pages, they were like 25 to 50, and that seemed to drag on. I didn't feel like all of the stories needed to be that long, so that's probably why it's my least favorite, but I still do really enjoy the way David Sedaris writes. I think that he's a really funny person, and I still did enjoy these regardless of how long they were, and regardless that it was my least favorite, because he's written so many and I've read them all. You have to have a least favorite, right? They can't all be the best. So that's this one. 3 stars, I think. Yeah, 3 stars. The first 2-star read I had was The Golden Hour by Beatrice Williams, and this was 450 pages, and if you recall in my video where I was talking about my TBR, I had started this and I was really enjoying it, and then I obviously started to not enjoy it. It just was the same thing over and over, and it was describing things, which I really hate in books. I hate descriptions. I get so bored by that. But like I said in the beginning of my video, I believe that there is an audience for this type of book, and I am passing this off to Logan's mom, so even though I rated it 2 stars, I know that she likes this kind of book, and I think that she'll really enjoy this. And I think that if I had been able to read this a little bit slower, I think that I would have enjoyed this too. I just had to force myself to read through it, and I couldn't take in any of what it was talking about, and I honestly didn't take much away from this book because of that. So definitely an audience for this, and even the audience might be if I were to reread it another time. Again, it was too long and too much for what I had to read it in. It was about World War II, and it was set in Havana, and there was a lot of gossip, and this woman worked for a gossip magazine, and so she was giving kind of exposing secrets in the magazine essentially, and she had an in, and nobody knew where these secrets were coming from, and then it tied into a storyline in the future and interwove, and it was really cool to see how all the stories tied together in the book, and I did enjoy that part of it. It is a multi-character, multi-generational perspective, which that part was really interesting. So I think that another time and another person, this would be the right book for them. And I would be interested in picking up another book by Beatrice Williams. I don't think that I'm gonna not read her just because I didn't like this first book or this first taste. So yeah, 2 stars. Next up I have The Sun Is Also a Star by Nicola Yoon, which I gave 3 stars. I don't like insta love stories. I'm not big on romance. This is YA. It was a fast read, and I gave this 3 stars because even though I didn't entirely enjoy the story or the premise of what was going on, I learned so much from this book. There are a lot of really interesting tidbits, and I liked the way that the book was outlined, and like I said, I ended up learning a lot, which I don't often get out of books. Even though I usually get something that I enjoy out of a book, I don't often end up learning a lot from fiction. And so the portions of that in this book I really did enjoy, and if you read it you'll see what I mean. I think that it's worth a read because it is fast, you're going to get through it quick, and you're going to learn a lot from it. Definitely worth picking up, but it may not be your favorite thing you've ever read. Unless you enjoy insta-love. I know a lot of people do enjoy that, so that's just not something that I enjoy. And it is about these 2 characters. One of them is about to get deported, and she has 1 day left, and she meets another character who has a Harvard interview that day, and they meet up, they fall in love, they spend their last day essentially together, and the ending was really good. I like that I don't want to ruin anything, so I'm just going to say that I liked the ending, but I didn't like that the characters met and immediately fell in love, because I just don't think that that's realistic. The next book that I read was The Old Man and the Sea by Ernest Hemingway, and I actually had an ebook copy of this from the library, so I don't have this. I ended up giving this 4 stars, which I'm going to actually do kind of an adult reaction versus what I read it in middle school reaction, because I hated this book in middle school and I never thought that I'd pick this book up again. But it was set on the water, and it was kind of a quick read because it's 150 pages, and I kind of needed that. And this is another one where I don't feel like I cheated by reading this, because it did take me a while to get through, because the points in the book resonated with me so strongly now as an adult when it didn't when I was it might have been when I was a freshman. It was in AP literature, so it definitely was in high school, not middle school, but regardless, I hated it. And I'll talk about the essay that I wrote about this book that we were required to write because it was scathing. And now as an adult, I really appreciate and understand the concepts in the book and what Ernest Hemingway was trying to do. Regardless of how I feel about Ernest Hemingway as a person, I think that this book made some really strong points and I really resonated with them here as an adult. So I want to talk about that in adult reaction, and I'm going to be filming that video. But just know that this book, if you read it in school, if it was required reading, it actually is a really good book when you don't have to analyze it for its meaning or its allegory or its symbolism. So definitely pick this up as an adult if you haven't. I really enjoyed it. The next book I gave 2 stars to was Meddling Kids by Edgar Quintero, and the reason I gave this 2 stars was because I was expecting horror and I got fantasy. There were fantasy characters in here that I just really didn't care about, and it just was not the book for me. But again, there is a genre and a type of person or a type of reader that will like this. I just wasn't one of them because I don't read fantasy and I don't enjoy fantasy, and this was very fantasy driven. Now, I also didn't resonate with the Scooby-Doo nostalgia in this. There are a lot of things, obviously the title Meddling Kids, there are a lot of points that were in Scooby-Doo that they wrapped up the nostalgia in here, and you'll find that if you read that, if you really like Scooby-Doo as a child. I didn't really watch a lot of Scooby-Doo, didn't really know that about Scooby-Doo, and so I didn't have that nostalgia piece either. So I definitely, it wasn't my favorite book, but it also wasn't the worst thing I've ever read. I got through it pretty quickly. It had some interesting premises, and I did like the characters in the book, but the fantasy aspect I just couldn't get on board with. So the next book that I read and I rated 5 stars was The Good Daughter by Karen Slaughter, and I picked this for the challenge, a book that is gory, gruesome, or gritty, and I didn't know if it was gonna be. I knew that Pretty Girls by Karen Slaughter was definitely in that category since that was the most disgusting book I've ever read in my life, in a good way. But I didn't know if this would be, but with a name like Slaughter, I figured it wouldn't hurt to try, and this book starts off with someone's eyeballs being cut out, so definitely was gruesome and gross and gritty. It was so good. Like I said, I don't give thrillers 5 stars, but both Pretty Girls and this, The Good Daughter, I have given 5 stars. I am approaching all of the standalones by Karen Slaughter that I can read. I have pieces of hers still that I haven't read yet, but I think that she only has those 3 standalones and the rest are series. So after I read pieces of her, I'm gonna have to actually pick up a series, which I don't like series, so I'm really struggling with that. But I think that because I love her writing so much that I really will like that. This is about a family whose mom gets murdered, but they were actually looking for her dad, and they almost get murdered themselves, the 2 daughters, and it talks about how they grow up, and then it ties them into this murder that's happening in the current day, and it is really good. You should read this if you love thrillers. I have only read 2 books by Karen Slaughter, but I think that she is quickly approaching one of my favorite authors, not just my favorite, one of my favorite thriller authors. So I'm definitely going to be picking up more of hers, even though it means I'm going to have to read series. It's fine. I'll be fine. I can do it. 5 stars. And the next one that I was surprised about, you know how I said I didn't have a book with dragons yet, and I was either going to read a book about dinosaurs or a children's book. I did end up pulling this off of my shelf, which is The Girl with the Dragon Tattoo by Stieg Larsson, and I have had this on my shelf for a really long time, and I didn't pick it up because A, mass market paperback, B, it's a series, and C, I saw the movie when I was in high school, again before I was reading books and seeing the movies. And there was a scene in the movie that I actually ended up getting up and walking out of because it was a graphic rape scene, essentially. And so I hadn't picked this book up because of that, but I did pick this book up, and the rape scene was portrayed in the book. So content warning for that. If that's something that really affects you or triggers you, I wouldn't read this by any means, but I felt that reading about it was less graphic as actually visually seeing it on the screen. I don't feel like it was necessary for the producers of that film to actually portray the full rape, but I really ended up loving this book. It was really good. and I'm going to continue reading with the series even though I don't like series. I did like the main character Elizabeth, and yeah, I was really surprised by this, that I liked this. I did really enjoy this, and didn't remember anything about the movie since I'd only seen a part of it anyways because I walked out of the theater on it. So I came into it almost with brand new eyes, and I really liked it, and it was really surprising, and I'm really happy that I used this for the Dragon Challenge because I ended up finding another favorite thriller. So, and I do think that there's either the 5th or the 6th coming out in the next month or two, so I will definitely try and read through that so that I can read that one as well. And that, my friends, is the 16/17 books that I read in the month of July. I was kind of miserable doing this challenge. I'm not gonna lie, it was a lot of reading and I didn't have any life. Everything around me kind of suffered. I didn't cook a lot from home. I didn't do any of the cleaning around the house. So I'm glad this is just a once a year thing. This is not something that I'm gonna have to continue doing. I will never force myself to read 17 books again until the next challenge, and I'm going to prepare a little bit better for that next challenge. So there you have it, the 17 books that I read in July. Thank you so much for watching my channel, and I hope you enjoyed this video, and I hope that you figured out some books that you're going to read, because I did have a really good reading month and I needed that. I needed a good reading month. I think that's the only way that I was able to get through the challenge. So I will see you next time, and until then, bye!